Well, good day, folks. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is the Talamanca Review. It's 3:23 p.m. on Saturday, the 29th of June, and YouTube has lifted my ban from publishing or streaming or what have you. So I'll start posting the videos there as well, and keep both sites going, YouTube and Rumble. So before we get into Stardust Ranch, I'm just going to bring you up to speed here with what's going on. So I have officially opened my business now. So if you want to come to Costa Rica and have, you know, 2 or 3 days of an incredible experience up here, you're more than welcome to do that. And I'll put the website under the notes of this video, but we're going to do a number of things. So we're going to do a 7-day jungle survival course. You're actually only in the jungle about 3 days. 7 days is the whole thing from the time we pick you up at the airport. There's 2 days of classroom training before you go in. And then you go in with your guides, and then you basically go in with minimal food, and you have to make your way through the jungle for 3 days and be able to read a map, be able to forage, find food, and be able to set up a camp and sleep at night, rain or shine. So this course has been set up to military standards. Bob set it up, so it's quite something. And then we do day trips. It's actually 2 nights here at the Earthbag Lodge, but so you come up, you have a meal, you get up early the next morning, and then we set out on horseback or walking or ATV, and we go to the reserve for the day, and then we ride back in the late afternoon, have a meal, you sleep over here, and then we get you off the mountain the next day. And then we're also going to do hunting and fishing trips to the reserve. Those will be only a few a year, though. So if you're interested, just send me an email, and I'll give you the pricing and everything. We don't put the pricing up on the website because, well, there's reasons for it over here. But anyway, so I'm pretty happy about this. I got a cat fight going on behind me, I think, and which is usually a male wants a female. From everything I've seen in the cat world, there's no consensual love. It's all some form of rape. But it's their world, and I'm not going to interfere. So we're going to get back to Stardust and start talking about this. So you got the basics down of like what it was like for, John to move there and everything. And now we're going to get into, guys, no mass. Man, the stuff you got to put up with here. But now we're going to get more into the slowly creeping awareness that something's not quite right with this place. And this takes place in a chapter that we called Invisible Disquiet, or Disquiet, chapter 4. And so let me try to explain this from a much larger perspective, and I'm gonna wing this, okay? And I'm gonna try to explain to you how you know when you're being bothered non-physically, okay? First of all, I'm not gonna lie to you. It helps immensely if you meditate or if you've done other forms of spiritual work to wake yourself up psychically and spiritually. More spiritually than psychically, but you have to be a little woken up to pick these things up, okay? Otherwise, you're just going to miss them. You're just going to think it's you. And the cleaner and quieter your environment is, the easier it is to pick these things up, okay? So I go back to the podcast I did on a simple ghost story. Now, if you go back and you watch that podcast again, you'll see that there was no declaration of a spirit in the cottage. It all had to be figured out through the various clues that were left around and the sequence of events that unfolded and what was going on in my consciousness and what was going on in my girlfriend's consciousness. And with all of that data together, we put it all together, and we came up with an understanding of what had happened to us on that long weekend. And it's very similar at Stardust Ranch. So, if you find yourself getting into negative moods and you don't know why, you're probably being spiritually bothered. Okay? There is really no overstating this. Okay? And what I'm about to say is 95% of what we have put into the blanket package of psychology and psychiatry, which makes you think that it's brain chemistry or there's something going wrong with this biological machine that you call a body. That's what the modern medicine in the first world wants you to believe. They don't want you thinking about spiritual interference. They want you believing there's a chemical imbalance in your brain, despite the fact that they have not been able to figure out what the proper chemical balance of the brain is. They know surprisingly little about the brain. Okay? They know way more than they did 100 years ago because of the equipment. Magnetic resonance imaging, MRIs and stuff like that, brain scans. And they've even invited highly evolved Tibetan monks to go into these machines so that they can look at their brain scans, which are completely different than a normal human being's. Okay? But the truth is that 95% of what happens to us at the level of feeling, emotion, and thought, meaning the thoughts that come into our heads, are spiritual. Something is placing it there. Okay? And this is a very important thing to understand. But again, to understand it, you have to think outside of the black box. You have to think outside of the black cube, which I spent so much time explaining in The Devil in Us. And the moment you start thinking and expressing yourself outside of the black cube, you open yourself up to ridicule from the mainstream consciousness, what they're enforcing through media, and very rational people around you, people who have, cultivated tremendous black box rationality, sequential thinking, memory, mathematics, calculus, algebra, trigonometry. All of these things, I'm not saying that they're not useful tools. They are. The problem is we're using them to define our reality, and that's not right. Because that's not how our reality is defined. Our reality is defined from an invisible reality, which projects this reality like a movie screen, like a movie. But it's 3D, right? We can bump into walls, we can cut our fingers, we can do all kinds of stuff. This is a physical experience. We're inside a physical machine, an organic machine called a human body. And what a tremendous machine it is. And as far as I'm concerned, this human body, the machine, should be understood way better than it is now. But look, anything you examine outside of the understanding that everything is consciousness and awareness, so awareness is cultivated consciousness. Okay, so you could say that the whole journey of existence is to cultivate awareness and to bring awareness back to God, because the vast body of God is uncultivated consciousness, and cultivated consciousness is awareness. So we're in a... Yeah, go right ahead. We're in a symbiotic relationship with with this reality, okay, and with this body. We're in a symbiotic relationship. It affects us, we affect it, okay? And this gets into all of the little trinkets of spiritual information that are out there now, popular amongst the New Agers for people who want to self-empower. But the best thing, before you start intentional manifestation, the very best thing you can do is clean up all your self-doubts, all of your own fears and phobias, and deal with that stuff. And things will work out well for you. You have to take risks in this life. Okay? You have to. That is the entire principle of a free society, is taking risks. And now we've cultivated a society where everybody wants to work for somebody else. They want to get that great guaranteed job at the government department or the government ministry if you're in the Commonwealth, or the big company. You know, oh, I got a full-time engineering gig at Booz Hamilton or Raytheon or Bechtel or General Electric, or so on and so forth, right? And that sort of decapitates you as a creative person. Now, if you're doing that, I'm not putting you down. There's all kinds of ways to spiritually enliven yourself if your work doesn't do it. But the fully lived life is one of adventure. And it's not just ascetic adventure. It's not going to a cave like a yogi and living there for 40 years. I mean, that's a bit extreme too, right? You don't have to go that far. We should be able to, and I think in the next age coming, we should be able to get everything working together. We should be able to be physically competent with the engineering and the technology. We should rectify our medicine, especially our mental health medicine, because most of it is spiritual. And we should get all of these things figured out. We should figure out more about the body and its protective sheaths. And we should understand how to amplify and repair them. Okay, and by protective sheath, I mean like the aura. You know, the aura is an extremely important part of the human body. And a strong and healthy aura is what keeps the negativity out. It keeps the goblins out of your thinking. Okay? So when you're constantly beset by negative or habitual pattern thinking, take a look at your life. Ask yourself, what is it I might be doing that's allowing this to happen? Now, I sometimes say things that are very unpopular. People don't want to hear them. The simple fact of the matter is, most of my friends who are North American now, like 90% of them smoke a lot of marijuana. Okay? And what that does is it weakens you, and it allows a lot of these negative entities into your thinking, or into your field, let's say. But once they're in your field, they can influence your thinking. And then people end up with these crazy mood swings. They don't know what's going on. Oh, I'm smoking too much pot. I'm this, I'm that. And it's very dangerous if you understand the bigger picture and what's going on with human beings. It's very dangerous. So anyways, let's circle back to Stardust Ranch. So John is John. And John is a psychiatric counselor. He's retired from his desk job. He's taking care of the ranch, trying to look for ways to make money off the ranch. His wife is still working. She's driving into Phoenix at this time. And he's at home alone all day. Okay, so he gets this very basic routine where he wakes up, he goes and he feeds the animals. He lets the dogs out for a walk. He goes and does his chores. Okay, so things like grocery shopping, everything that the person who stays home would do. And John was the stay-home person in this marriage, so he did all of that stuff. Okay, did all of it. Then some days he might go out for a horseback ride. Or he might go out in his Jeep Cherokee and drive off-road in the desert. I think Arizona is great for off-road driving. You got to be careful, though. Like if you go 10, 15 miles off the road and anything were to happen to your car, There might not be cell signal there. And then you've got the uncomfortable task of, walking back in the sun, right? So a lot of people die in the desert. The desert is a dangerous place. It can be a dangerous place, just like the north is a dangerous place. A lot of people die in the north. They freeze to death in Canada. Happens every year. People freeze to death. Not in great numbers, but people freeze to death, man. You get drunk, you fall asleep in the snow, you're going to die. Okay? And it happens. People get drunk, they fall asleep in the snow, and they freeze to death. And you never wake up. They say it's very peaceful. Anyways, I don't know how I get off on these tangents, but the desert's a dangerous place, okay? And we're going to get into some really freaky desert stories as we get into this book, because John's got a lot of freaky stories about being out in the desert as well. So what he started to notice is he would be angry all the time. Now you would expect it would be the opposite, right? Why would it be the opposite? It would be the opposite because he's achieved his goal. He's liberated himself from the world he didn't like, the 9-to-5 world. He's living his dream. He always wanted a ranch. He's bought a ranch. And here he is 3 months in, and he's finding himself often in states of anger. I know exactly what he was going through. Now this was, as it turns out, related to the house and the beginning, okay? So that's phase 1 when they're trying to push you away. Okay, so let me explain how the spirit world works. Their number one rule, if they can maintain it, is to keep you unaware of their existence. Okay, this is why we don't get any open declarations from the spiritual world. And what does that secrecy tell you? Because they could openly announce themselves. I don't think there's any spiritual prohibition against it. Okay, so they could openly announce themselves, but they don't. What does that tell you? I'll give you a couple seconds to think about it. 1001, 1002. Whatever relationship the spirits have with living beings, it's better that the living beings don't know. It's better that you think you're angry or you're depressed because you've got what psychiatrists call clinical depression. And they have a medicine for you, don't you know? It'll recalibrate your brain chemistry. It'll block some of the sensors in your brain so you don't pick up the negative stuff. But I would make the case that the brain knows exactly what it's doing, and it's giving you a perfect reading as a living being inside the body. It's like your computer when you're in this body. And to begin tinkering with the computer, you better know what you're doing. Okay? And I'm not convinced they do in neurology, in psychiatry, or in any of these fields, just because they never speak about consciousness. They speak about the flesh object, the body, and that's it. And that's extremely distressing when you have a deeper understanding of what's really going on, that they're that blind. And I think this is willful blindness, because the people who set up the institutions, they've done it this way. Okay? They are conscious of the fact that we live in a spiritual reality, and they're maintaining the same operative code as the spirits and principalities that they cooperate with, which is keep the average human being unconscious of this. And so when you see a lot of this thinking coming into our reality, the psychiatry, the chemistry, the neurochemistry, and all of these things, you're either dealing with people who haven't really thought about it, or you're at the very top, you're dealing with insiders. Okay? You only need 1 or 2 insiders at the very top of anything to corrupt everything. They can corrupt 1 million, 5 million people below them in an institutional structure. Okay? So there's only been a small handful of voices that have really been directing and influencing the U.S. State Department for the last 40 years. The thousands of people who've worked for the State Department in various capacities are not in on any conspiracy. And if you were to bring it up at a dinner party, they'd laugh at you. They'd think you were mentally ill, paranoid. Okay? If the same thing would happen if you brought up the state of understanding about the body and its relationship to us as spirit, and you were in a dinner party with doctors, they might look at you like you were crazy. Some kind of granola eating, barefoot, grass walking fruitcake, you know? And the material is the most forceful voice in our world still, although it's getting weaker and weaker every day. Okay? When you get somebody as big as Tucker Carlson saying, I think our problems are spiritual, and this is one of his principal messages after leaving Fox News. When you get Russell Brand baptizing and becoming a Christian, things are changing. Now, whether Russell Brand did that for ratings or it was a true spiritual movement, I don't know. He's a master of public relations. He's as good as anybody on Madison Avenue. He doesn't have to hire anybody. He can manage his own public image. And getting a Christian baptism was probably not a bad thing for him. So, John starts to get angry a lot. He didn't express it around his wife. He tried to sort of keep it to himself. He told me writing the book, and I captured it in the chapter, that the tension and anger he felt reminded him of growing up in Evanston, Illinois, where he said, I guess it was a poor suburb of Chicago, and you had to have eyes in the back of your head to stay safe all the time, right? And you feel constantly tense and a little bit paranoid and all of these sorts of things. So that's how he felt, right? Constant state of vigilance is how he described it. You know, so just if, let's say you're a security guard, you're a bodyguard for somebody, you're a bodyguard for Mark Zuckerberg, okay? You're going to be in a constant state of vigilance, but when you're not working, it's going to go away. The thing with John was he was in this state of vigilance all the time, could not escape it, okay? Didn't know what was going on. Didn't have a clue what was going on. Completely and utterly escaped him. And another thing that started to happen is, and you may recognize this as well, and again, this is also spiritual, okay? So spirits, they like to fuck with us. It's amusing for them, especially the low spirits who haven't gained much elevation or gone to what we would call a heavenly realm in the afterlife. Okay? And in a negative afterlife, most of the hell regions are created by the individuals who conscript, because your power of co-creation, once you get out of the body, is intense. And so you co-create a negative reality with the spiritual forces on the astral, and you condemn yourself. There's nobody waiting for you there saying, hey, you're going to hell. These near-death experiences you watch on the Next Level Soul podcast and the Jeff Marr podcast and things like this, don't think that's the only thing that happens, okay? And the near-death experience is something completely different than actually dying. Because when you have an NDE, the forces you engage are different than the forces you engage when you actually die. Okay? So you can end up in various states, but one of the states people end up in is a kind of aimless astral existence. And although you can't starve to death, you can't freeze to death, you can't burn, but you can still feel all of those things. You can feel hungry, you can feel like you're burning, you can feel like you're freezing, you can feel like you're starving. And there's a sort of intense boredom as well. So just imagine you own all of your time and you don't sleep. You're up 24 hours a day. There's no escape. You never sleep. And you're just hanging around there on the astral plane, watching human beings, going out into the woods, seeing what's there. It's really no different than when you were physically alive, except the necessities of the body are absent. And that form you're in will last a lot longer than a physical body. Okay? This is what it is to become ghosted. Many of the ghosts are in intense states of trauma. Now remember, I told you as we've led up to this podcast, some of the things that went on at Stardust Ranch. There was a suicide, and that was undoubtedly brought about by the negative forces. So what did I mean when I say this is stage one and the spirits? And by the way, when I say spirits, you can throw extraterrestrials in there as well, okay? So when I say spirits, I mean extraterrestrials too. Generally speaking, the ETs want you to know they exist. This is why so many of the people who recover abduction experiences do it under hypnosis. But their conscious mind can't remember it because it's blocked. Okay? So now I want you to think for a moment about the possibility of things out there capable of blocking us. So how could something block our memory? Don't we have control over our own memories? Apparently not. This is just one of the realities of this planet. Now, as you grow in consciousness, you recover memory. One of the interesting affectations of living up here on the mountain is about a year in, I started to have memories of being 3 and 4 years old, which I hadn't recaptured. And when I say memories, I mean this is the first time I've had this memory since it occurred. No instance of this memory whatsoever. Right? So when you're in a place that something wants to move you out of, it will first try to affect your mood. So go back to the 2 times I started this book, Stardust Ranch. I engaged these forces. Okay? I don't know what they were. I never saw them. I very rarely see things. I'm not clairvoyant. I'm really good with hearing things that are non-physical. Clairaudio, I think they call that. But clairvoyant, no. But I'm able to put things together by connecting them to the physical plane. And generally, I'll have my things explained to me in my physical timeline. The clues will pop up, and I'll begin a dialogue with the other side. But it all takes place in my physical reality. This is true grace, by the way. So true grace is to have any question or circumstance related to your life answered for you by necessity in your timeline by the divine appearance of information that you need. And it just kind of shows up. Wow. I'm so used to these coincidences now, it's my normal. It's been my normal for a few decades. These coincidences are my normal. So you just get used to them after a while. And yeah. So they were trying to push John off the ranch, and they were trying to push me off the book. So I wasn't getting angry, but it was like an irritation. I was being irritated, like they were working on me. You could feel it. Now, you have to be living in a certain kind of environment, both internally and externally. The two go hand in hand. Okay, internal and external development or environment are in a symbiotic relationship. So if you have a very good and clean internal environment, meaning your mind doesn't run away with crazy thoughts, you don't worry about shit, you live in the moment and you're happy. Not ecstatic, because this thing about happiness, as we've tied it into our consumer system, is ridiculous. But it's the absence of boredom. I never get bored. There's a complete absence of boredom in my life. I've always got something to do with my time that interests me and engages me. When somebody else controls your life, it's much more difficult to have those feelings. It's much more difficult to have feelings of well-being and place and utility and purpose. It's much more difficult. Okay? It's one of the affectations of living that kind of life. Now, a lot of people I know can balance themselves out through loving service to family. So if you go back and you look at the baby boomers, they could do the dredge jobs, but the reward was you had a house, you had a wife, you had 2, 3 kids, everybody was happy, everybody had what they needed, everybody had a dental plan, everybody had proper nutrition, everybody had their own bedroom, right? Master bedroom and 3 bedrooms, 4 bedroom house. This was normal for the baby boomers. Now it's like some luxurious life that nobody can remember anymore. Okay? But it was normal for the baby boomers. And you could take the job. You could take the dead end job, right? You could go and you could work at the factory. You could work at Ford. You could work at General Motors. You could work at Toyota, working on some assembly line in this mind-numbing work, because the balance of your life, which was loving and had things growing in it, your wife was happy, your kids were happy, or if you're the breadwinner, your husband was happy and your kids were happy and you had your family. And the family is a very spiritual thing, by the way. For all its ups and downs, its roller coasters of chaos, its mutual chaos by one member of the family causing misery to the other members of the family, or one member of the family bringing joy to the other members of the family. It is a collective experience, and it has a spiritual purpose. Eventually you'll break out of it. I broke out of it. So I've said before on my show, but I'll repeat myself. There's 2 forms of constriction that you have to overcome as a spiritual person: culture and family. And the 2 are usually in a symbiotic relationship. They're usually connected to each other. So culture and family have to be overcome. Doesn't mean you abandon those things. I've been meditating for 10 years. I don't need a mother or father anymore. No, it's not like that. It's just that you transcend it and you reach a level of beneficial detachment where you're not affected or destroyed or hurt by it anymore. It just is what it is. You have a family. Okay? But that energy was profoundly balancing for people. We don't have it anymore. We don't have the family unit anymore. We don't have the 2, 3 kids. People can't afford it. Some people, but most people can't afford it. Family is dying. So if the family is dying, what is the purpose of your life? Why go into these bullshit jobs? Why go into an assembly line 40, 44 hours a week and do this dead-end job and drive yourself crazy? Why do it? Right? It's very strange when you think about it. Why do it? If you don't have a spiritual reason for doing it, you can't spiritualize the work. Okay? And it's possible to spiritualize work. Make it spiritual, and you make it spiritual by giving it a higher purpose. So I was pushed off the book in 2012, and it was the forces from the ranch. They didn't want the book written. They tried again in 2019, but they couldn't overcome me up here in the Talamanca Mountains. And that white light came in and cleared everything out for me. So I got some spiritual assistance, perseverance. I don't know what the white light was. I don't need to know. What do I need to know as the human being, boots on the ground in the body? This book needs to be written. I've been given this book. I promised this guy I would write this book. I'm going to finish this book. And I finish it. It doesn't matter to me that you don't need to understand the entire financing and legal underpinning of your local police department every time they come out to help you with something. Your neighbor's dog bit you. Well, how does a police department form? What is your mandate? You don't need it. It's the same thing with the spiritual stuff. People get too caught up in the details. And I think one of the reasons is there's a lot of big psychic flakes out there masquerading as spiritual teachers. The fellow who labeled himself the Galactic Historian was one of these guys. This internet television network Gaia is just loaded with them, right? It's not to say that there isn't some good stuff on Gaia. But what it does is, look, that stuff is useful in the beginning of a spiritual path, in the first 2 to 5 years. Because the mind is constantly going to fight you, just like these entities were fighting these Greys or whatever they were fighting the writing of this book in 2012 and 2019. It's the same thing. It's absolutely no different. Okay? So what am I getting at here? I'm getting at consciousness. I'm getting at getting things done. And I'm getting at what provides the resistance. Is it, can you convince yourself it's just you? You're too lazy to do this? You don't see value in it? Or why? Why aren't you doing something you said you were going to do? And very often you'll find there's some form of spiritual resistance there. Happens all the time. So I got my spiritual assistance, and as I said, I didn't know what it was, and I didn't need to know what it was. Just a white light came in and cleaned everything out in my house, and I was able to finish the book. I'm very glad I did. Stardust Ranch changed my life. It did. It's not the book I'm most proud of. By the way, if you want to read the book, the two books I'm most proud of, they're both on Amazon. They sell very few copies, but they're well worth reading if you like good stories and good books. One is called God as an Economist, published in 2007 in Canada under the title Coureur de Bois. And if you don't speak French, I'm not going to explain that to you. And the other one is a book I self-published in 2012 or 2014, I can't remember, just before I came to Costa Rica. And it's called The Stolen Child. I promise you, no joke, The Stolen Child will be the best book you read all year. It'll probably be the best fictive experience you have all year, and that includes everything that's going on out there now. House of Dragons Season 2, your favorite TV shows. The most spellbinding story you will encounter right now is The Stolen Child. Okay? I'm not going to tell you what it's about. Let it be a complete surprise. But given that I worked on that book in 2012, finished the first draft of that book in 2012, by reading that book, you will see me being prepared to write Stardust Ranch, The Light of Darkness, and The Devil in Us. You'll see me being psychologically and spiritually prepared for it in that book 8 years before these books came into my life. It's very interesting the way life works. There's a different plan on the other side. What you're meant to get done, you're going to get done, whether you think you're going to get it done or not. It's just the way it works. Okay? In some ways, life here is on rails, like roller coaster rails. You really can't go off the rails. You know, I'm not even joking. I mean, if you were to see somebody's life plan who committed suicide, you might very well see the suicide in the life plan before they came into the body. Meaning that the spirit, the soul, knew this was going to be a suicide incarnation and came into the body just to experience that. See, when we're in spirit, we think we can endure anything in the physical body. And then we incarnate, as we've done many times on this planet, and we remember, holy shit, this is really hard. What was I thinking on the other side? Anyways, I'm going to take a little break. I will be back. Well, actually, I'm streaming now. I don't know. I just have to go turn off the stove. I have bread baking. I'll be right back. That might be the finest loaf of bread I've made in some time. Half whole wheat and half white. Who live streams and goes to check on a loaf of bread? I make the circular bread too, like the Romans. I just let it rise naturally on a pizza pan or a flat pan. The loaf bread is bullshit. It's part of the papal work system to make sandwiches for lunch, for a timed lunch. When you're on somebody else's clock, when you make bread yourself, you do the circular Roman bread. So this was the resistance to the book. This was also John's first experience on the ranch in 1997. So his first 6 months on the ranch, I'm talking about the first 90 days now, the first 3 months, but his experience with the ranch was like my experience with the book. It was the same experience. The ranch was saying, without identifying itself, it did not want to announce itself. Bread timer. The entities and beings at the ranch did not want to announce themselves. They did not want John to know that they were there. And so they begin by fucking with your mood and your thinking, by oppressing you. Okay? If you're not praying regularly, like daily, meditating regularly, daily, fasting 2-3 times a year for 7 days or longer, being attentive to your consciousness from the inside out. The psychiatry is from the outside in, right? We're talking about attention to consciousness from the inside out. If you're not doing those things, I have the unfortunate duty of informing you that you are completely susceptible to these forces. Unfortunate but true. You are susceptible to these forces. Spiritual forces, extraterrestrial forces. Okay? So for John it was anger, and then little things would happen to compound the anger. Constantly stuff being misplaced. And you get upset. You blame, because you can't think of anything doing it supernaturally. You immediately fall back to your logical way of thinking and you blame the people around you. But this is one of the favorite tricks on the other side, right? And sometimes they do it for no reason other than to just to do it, the way 14-year-old boys will egg a house or put a bag of burning excrement on somebody's doorstep and then ring the doorbell. It amuses them. When you think of the other side, don't think of it as being extravagantly different than the world we live in and the motives of people as you've witnessed them in story and your own experience. Because it's really the same thing. Okay? Now, very strong spirits, very cultivated and defined souls will go way out of the human experience after they die. They won't, unless they stay in the middle kingdom to help human beings for another 500,000 years or so. Okay, or in the case of Christ, maybe 2,000. Okay, because he's still here, or an aspect of him is still here, anyways, as far as I'm concerned. So, this is how you understand the other side. Okay. And again, with everything you've been through with me, you should be forming a pretty good map of the world between the physical and the spiritual. You should be able to start mapping it in your mind and how it goes together, how it's interlinked between all the time I've spent on The Devil and Us and now what I'm doing with Stardust Ranch. So the initial stage of the ranch was very similar to a haunting. It's like the opening act of almost every horror movie. And they always just they start gentle. And the message is, get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out of here. Get out of here. That's what happened to the Mexican family that was doing the beef business. There's no doubt in my mind that that's what happened to the 17-year-old son who committed suicide with a shotgun on the day of his high school graduation in Arizona. I mean, that's pretty dramatic. If he didn't have a date was the reason, right? I mean, come on. What are you talking about? So, this is what goes on. This is what went on with John. And it just kept increasing. He did his very best to hide it from Joyce. Did his very, very, very best. So So phase one is the unpleasant, the bad moods and the hair trigger temper. Phase two is stuff disappearing. So here, I'll just read a bit from the book, a paragraph from when he gets to this point. When things started disappearing, I realized that I had to become more scientific about what was going on in the house when I was alone. I began to extract myself from the idea that this was all in my head. I documented. I began to notice that there was phenomenon associated with the sense of disquiet I had. The disquiet is what I called it, the bad moods, the anger, disquiet. The only thing I can compare it to is a change of pressure in the room. You might have experienced something like this in anticipation of a thunderstorm or some similar climate-related event. But I assure you it was physical. There was a distinct change of pressure in the room. Sometimes it would seem to get colder. And these physical anomalies became John's first documented symptoms of the disquieting presence in the house. Once I documented a change in the pressure and temperature in the room, I cast my gaze further afield. I noticed that before these events, these disquieting presences, there would be a disruption and aberrant behavior among the animals. So remember, he kept horses, and I think he had 4 or 6 pairs, mating pairs of Rottweilers. So I guess he was breeding Rottweilers. The horses would become agitated. The dogs would sometimes start fighting among themselves. Everything around me indicated that something preternatural was coming into my space. And all of this began with bad moods that I thought were just regrets after buying the ranch. As I was figuring all of this out, I did it the hard way. It wasn't until some months living at the ranch that I figured out that something was coming and going. Something preternatural. You folks know what preternatural means? There's natural, supernatural, and preternatural is completely outside of both. It's like something, it's a circle in a square. It just doesn't belong. Preternatural. Okay? Now, once he figured this out, it was almost as though whatever was there decided to express itself more freely, given that he had accepted it there. So this is stage 2. Okay? So if you go back to my ghost story, both of us, both my girlfriend and I, are approached individually. I'm approached with the poem in my head and then correlating that poem to the guest registry at the cottage. She goes out the next day down to the end of the dock at midnight to retrieve hair conditioner and comes back convinced that I was there trying to scare her, and when I convince her I never left the cottage, she tells me she had this feeling of her stepbrother being down there, the dead stepbrother. Now, once the two of us made the outer connection and realized this inner phenomenon, it's almost like that is the creation of the portal that allows the spirit, in this case it was a spirit, a dead human being, but the ETs are the same way, to express itself more demonstrably. So when John, through a scientific process, a very rational process, deduced that he was not having mood fluctuations based on his diet, the water he was drinking, the television he was or was not watching, or any of those things. When he figured it out, like, this is really happening, something is coming and going from my ranch, and these are the signs that it's coming. That for him was the beginning of the portal to more experience. That mental state, that realization, that acknowledgement of it brought the ET presence into more force. So what happened then was they would start openly moving things in front of them. So you'd be looking at the counter, and like a set of car keys would move 6 inches right in front of your eyes. You would be in the TV room, and a stack of plates would just fall over. No wind, no 4.8 earthquake on the Richter scale disrupting things. Nothing to indicate what was going on. Just fall over. Cars wouldn't start. Stuff like this. Little malfeasances, little nuisances. Okay? It's the exact same way that I ferreted. I've gotten really good at this now. And it's the exact same way I figured out that my friend who was up here for 4 months, and he is my friend, he's had a very unfortunate life, to say the least, had a demon with him. Okay? And given that he wasn't interested and he didn't have the discipline to evacuate it, which can be done fairly easily. You don't need an exorcist or Roman ritual or anything like that. You can make your own space uncomfortable for the demon. But he was very comfortable with his demon. And when I figured out this demon was in him, the demon knew I figured it out, because I don't know how to explain it. Like, they're beyond clairvoyant. They operate in the realm clairvoyance comes from. So they're beyond clairvoyant. So the demon knew. So me and the demon know about, the demon knows I know about it, and I know the demon knows about me. How do I know the demon knows about me? Because the moment I created that opportunity portal by acknowledging it and realizing it in the astral, it started to act out much more in the physical. The woman getting possessed, the transformer blowing, the car not starting, like everything going wrong around this guy. That's what they do. How do you protect yourself against these things? You become aware of them, and then when you become aware of them, ask for help, and you'll get help. And I'll tell you why you'll get help. Because what you're dealing with, you're not supposed to be dealing with. It's not supposed to be operating against you in this realm. Okay? So you'll get help the same way you would if somebody started to beat you up on the sidewalk and you lived in a civilized place. Somebody would dial 911 and the cops would be there in 3 minutes. Okay? You're going to get help because what's being done to you is not, they're not supposed to be doing it. And the general atmosphere around you agrees. And somebody's going to either come and help you or somebody's going to call for help. And it's very similar with these situations. Very similar with these situations. And so you ask for help. So all you do is you ask for help. And help will come. You don't even have to know what you're talking to. You don't have to name an archangel or any of that nonsense, okay? Just say, Spirit and aids of the Creator, anyone in alignment with the Creator and its purpose. This is my situation. I'm being molested and tormented by a non-physical being here. I think it's demonic in nature. If I've done something to deserve this, please make me aware of it. Bring it into my timeline. Bring it into the forefront of my thinking. Or bring it out in a dream. I will accept responsibility, change my behavior to vacate this phenomenon. And if it's not me, please come in and take this out of here. Just come in and take it out. Something will come and help you. That's almost 100%. You have to have faith, though. You have to believe so. But I mean, if you're already dealing with the negative entity, and you've already identified it as a negative entity, and you're sure, you're not doubting yourself, you're going, I am in the midst of supernatural phenomenon, okay? Then you don't have to worry about faith because you've already got it. You've transcended the need for faith. You're having the experience, right? So this is how it worked with John, and this is how it always works. These are the signs. And so this is why controlling your life and taking care of yourself always begins with an extreme self-awareness. And that has to do with spiritual exercise. You can't just say, oh, I'm baptized and I believe in Jesus, I'm covered, I don't have to do any work. The work is the sensitization of your consciousness. It has to be done. You're not going to build muscle if you don't go to the gym. You're not going to build endurance if you don't walk a lot or run or jog. Okay? You're not going to become a really good tennis player unless you practice tennis. Spiritual exercises to develop spiritual consciousness. And I would suggest in the time we live, it's a martial art now. More effective than judo or karate or mixed martial arts or kung fu or anything. Because this is the principal adversary we're facing in this age is spiritual. And therefore you need to learn to defend yourself spiritually. It's that simple. Not complicated at all. The final escalation was dead animals. And we'll get into that in the next podcast. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review.